encouraging young minds in the realms of research. Research is really, really, really close to my heart. It is actually my soul. So today, I'm Ruby Charak. I am an associate professor of psychology in the Department of Psychological Science here, and Ines will be joining me shortly in co-presenting this talk. When I was approached by Stephanie, I kind of thought that, okay, what should I just focus on my research and kind of bore you to death with that? Or should I talk about the whole lab and the research activities that we do? And I went for the latter, and I will touch upon my research, but I will focus more on what my lab does. And if any of you are interested and have the time, contact us. So let's start. All right, this is the layout of the talk. I will speak for around 30 minutes. Ines will speak for the next 15 minutes, and we'll leave at least 15 minutes for questions and answers. So the layout of the talk is I'll talk about how I started my academic career, my research journey, our research networks, our current research topics, planning and dissemination of research, and our future plans. And I'm looking for young Turks like you all. Ines will present her research, and we'll have time for. Judith, can you just mute your mic? Yeah, thank you. So starting with how I sowed the seeds of my research career. If you haven't figured out yet, I am not from the US. My origins are in India. And back then, I think the research is something that starts off very young in one's lifetime. If you ever heard your parents or your caregivers, talk that, hey, when you were a baby, you were like so busy crawling under the sofa or the couch, and if you were bringing these things to us that we'd lost maybe like a week ago, and that's true. You want to find something that's lost in your house for more than a week, give it to the infant, like ask the infant or the cat to do it. They're so curious. We are, as human beings, we are very, very curious beings. And that's where the whole curiosity and the research starts. You want to look for things, you want to discover things. Those things are there. You're just researching for them, and you're validating the being of those things. And that's how even I started, like every human being. But I was lucky enough that my parents really instilled this skill in me. It is a skill. In a way, we're all born with it, but then we develop this skill of being curious or retaining that curiosity that we have as human beings, and not letting our daily life stressors get into the way of our curiosity of discovering stuff. That's how I started as well. And it took me a while. And most of my education is from India, except for my PhD. And once I've done my clinical studies from there, clinical research. And that's when the seed of academic research or career was sought. I wanted to be a professor, and I wanted to be someone who did research. As far as my country could take me in terms of research, I reached the highest echelons. And later I was like, I need to look for another place which can really get my research on the level that I wanted. And hence I stepped out of my country. So that's how the research seed was really, sown in my career. This is my research trajectory. I start all the way from my origins here in India. I'm actually from here. I have had the opportunity to travel all over India because my father was in the Indian Air Force, and he got deployed and moved every 2 years. So we moved with him. I've changed, I don't know, like 11 schools in my whole lifetime. And that's, so I was used to traveling. I was pretty open to traveling, forming new bonds, new attachments. So that way I was resilient. And then once I did my undergrad, my master's, then I MPhil in clinical psychology to become licensed in India, I wanted to do more research, but I was falling short of who would train me because I had reached a certain level. And then I heard of this beautiful country here, United States. And they said, oh, there's a lot of nice research happening there, especially in the realms of trauma that I study. And I thought, okay, let me look at this country. what is that? And the first thing that pops up is GRE. And I was like, God damn it, I have to do the GRE. And I took the GRE and it was super expensive, and I did well. But the next was that you have to apply. And I heard many of you are applying right now. And I don't know what the situation right now is, but back then you had to pay $50 to $100 for each application. That was way out of my bandwidth. I just couldn't afford it. So this plan got canceled. And I started saying, all right, who would like to take me up for my research? And I was lucky enough to, meet a team that had traveled all the way from the Netherlands and United Kingdom and then come to India, and they were looking for young researchers such as me. And I was among the two picked by them, among many, to come to the Netherlands here. This small little country here is the Netherlands, also known as Holland. And I was picked by a research university in Amsterdam. Fantastic place. You must visit it. And I was in Amsterdam, fully funded, and that served me because I didn't have to pay a dime. Not that I had any money, so that worked out. And in the meanwhile, I also got an opportunity in this country here is Denmark. It's Scandinavia, and I got some, funding from there as well because of my research acumen and my work. And I started working. There are very big centers. These are small countries, but they produce a lot of research. And I started working on trauma. They have big trauma centers there. So I started working. So that's how my trajectory was. And once I completed these, I then got an offer to come to Ohio to a PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder lab, one of the leading labs. And I packed my bags and I came here in Ohio. I did 1 year, simultaneously completed my PhD. And then I got an opportunity to work on my postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln on an NIH-funded project on sexual re-victimization in young women. And I worked there for 2 years before I got picked by UTRGV for, especially for the PhD program here. And I've been here since 2016, and it's been a fun ride so far. So that's my research journey. And believe me, back then, when I was taking this journey, it seemed so hard and so tiring and so arduous. Like I was into a lot of self-pity that why do I have to do it? Why didn't I not have the money to just go here and just have the privilege of studying? And but I'll tell you, and I'm telling this story to you for especially the ones if you identify with any of these experiences or any hardships, that when you're experiencing these hardships, you perhaps don't understand, you get frustrated, but in the long run, these are experiences and they really shape and mold your personality, your resilience, and your research careers and academic careers or any career that you wish to pursue. And I'll tell you how. So this is my research journey. And in today, because I've traveled so much in the Western Hemisphere, I have a lot of active research networks. And these are the countries that I right now at this point have active research networks. Besides the United States, I have active projects going on with scholars in the field of trauma in Denmark. I just submitted a grant with people in Sweden and on cyber victimization and perpetration. I'm working on folks in the Netherlands, of course, because I did my PhD from there here. So I continue to work with them. In Spain, I'm working on LGBTQ related trauma and minority stressors. In Israel, I am working with collaborators again in cyber victimization and complex PTSD. In Burundi, which is in Africa, it's a little small country here, sadly, one of the poorest in the world. It's another world there. I'm working on intergenerational transmission of violence. It's a conflict zone and how those historical traumas get transferred from one generation to the next. So we have dyads of parents and their children, and we are looking at how that just spills over from one generation to the next. And of course, my home country, I continue to support my students back home in their research, mostly to do in the field of trauma. So this is my research network, and this is my current research network. I wish to expand more. I wish to expand in Central and Latin America, more in the Asian side, and I would, slowly and steadily I will. But for now, this is my research network. So here, talking about my research, my current research topic. I was always interested in abnormal behavior. Normality somehow did not interest me as much. I want everything to be normal, but somehow the exciting factor is something which is so-called not normal. And that's why my work centers around any kind of traumatic stress, which is defined as some life experience, some dangerous life experience that leaves one feeling very helpless and threatened. It can range from all the way from experiences of child abuse, domestic violence, to natural disasters. We had the winter storm, people lost their lives in the storm. So yes, it's a traumatic event. So even natural disasters, man-made disasters, terrorism, so on and so forth. And I look at how these events can lead to mental health reactions or traumatic stress reactions. And traumatic stress reaction entails all the way from having depression or symptoms of depression, anxiety, substance use, which is more behavioral, to all the way to post-traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not in the DSM-5, but it is an ICD-11. So that's what my work is. Even at this stage, me and my lab, we have over 50 research publications in this realm. To be more specific, I work on child abuse. This is really dear to my heart, this research. Child abuse and neglect. My whole PhD is on this. I looked at large samples from India, adolescent samples from India and the Netherlands, and I did some comparisons there. And not surprising, in low and middle income countries, the rates of child abuse and neglect are alarmingly high. So much so that every second person has been abused, which is quite a bit. Next, I also started focusing on post-traumatic stress disorder and complex PTSD. As a disorder, this is something that I have dedicated my life to. And complex PTSD is a newer diagnosis that I've just started investigating because it's not in DSM-5, which is in the United States. It's ICD-11, which is the rest of the world. I have started working with folks in the United Kingdom to look at their data sets on complex PTSD and how it's different. It's different from post-traumatic stress disorder because it takes into consideration, disturbances in self, in emotion dysregulation, and I'm happy to elaborate later on. And something that I recently started, actually coming from when I joined UTRGV, is looking at domestic violence from the lens of it happening over cyberspaces. Most of us are on cyber spaces right now, be it social media, we're using, my phone is next to me, texting, somebody's texting me, I'm looking at it, I just can't help myself. And how these platforms, the technology platforms, are being used to, by people to engage in harassing or stalking or victimizing one's partner. Law does not really look into it too much, but there is so much of research that shows that, if you have been, that cyber IPV can lead to in-person IPV. We have that research out there. And something else that I focus on is on traumatic stress and minority stressors in LGBTQ young adults. And I also focus on the intergenerational transmission of violence. This is mostly in lower and middle income countries that I'm focusing on. Traumatic stress and minority stressors I'm focusing on population, the Latinx population and populations from Spain. So I just thought that I could, just talk about how we actually plan a study, or at least in my lab, how we plan a study or create a study. So this is me and my team back in the days when there was no COVID. We could sit together really close to each other, eat some healthy oranges, nice juicy ones, and talk about research. So this is one of my favorite studies where we actually did in-person studies in the colonias, in Mercedes, Indian Hill, etc. And we looked at how intergenerational transmission of violence happens from mothers to her two kids, so like sibling aggression and how it trickles down. So we ended up collecting 40 triads, so 40 mothers with dyads of her children, you know. So how did we start? We usually start with having a group discussion about, okay, this is a topic, intergenerational transmission of violence is a topic that we really want to work on. It's a joint team effort. We start with the planning stage. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of reading, planning. We distribute our work. You can see everyone has their papers and stuff. So we've probably read articles. We're discussing these things. Now, in some cases, you know, especially when we're working with multiply marginalized and minoritized communities like we did in the colonias, we have to engage with nonprofits and the orgs here. So luckily as soon as I set my foot in the Valley, I started reaching out to the nonprofits. And since 2017, I have been working with them pro bono, voluntary. I volunteer with them, and I've built a nice network with them, and they help us. So, you know, talking to them about what are the issues in the Valley, sometimes sitting in our, you know, ivory towers, in our siloed worlds, we don't know what the grassroots level problems are. So just talking to the case workers there, the nonprofits, they are a plethora of knowledge. So always seek that out. We plan our studies, what are the issues, and then once we design the study, we create the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board application, and we kind of get an approval from them. It takes some time there. And then once we have approval, we start engaging in collecting data. So I remember since we're all really busy during the weekdays, and also because we were collecting mums and two kids here. Here, I just wanted to mention, these are my two students here. We have permission to click pictures from the participants with the disclaimer that their faces will not be shown. And here you cannot see the face of any of the participants. So we would go all the way up to Mercedes and the colonias there to collect data, but we had to do it during the weekend because children go to school on weekdays and in the evenings they do homework. So they don't have time to fill up your data, or they don't have time to answer your questions. So we had to do all our stuff during the weekend. And we did that. We would go in the morning, spend the whole day and collect data. Once we collect data, we do pilot checking. And in between, we do a pilot checking. So we don't collect all the data and then, pilot check. In between, we start to pilot check. And by pilot checking, I mean, we start, all of us are human beings. We make errors. So we like to go back. Like, for example, I've conducted 10 interviews out of the 40. I like to go back and see, is there anything that can improve in the study? And every time we find something that can be improved in the study. So it could be as simple as, we did not wish them and the person was slightly, closed, or how do we make them more open and comfortable and things like that, So we do pilot checking. And once the whole data is collected, we do management, cleaning, and of course, then the data analysis happens. This is a whole process. And then comes the fun part. My whole lab and myself, we love to travel. We love to travel to conferences, and conferences is a good way to see the United States. 7 years back, I was new to the United States. I use this platform, conferences, to go to places, present my research, get my academic career, and also have a little vacation there, like see a new city, present in the morning, evening, go out with friends and students and, see the city. So we do that. So in the same way, once we have our research up and going, we've analyzed the data, we kind of, my students and I, we kind of go out and disseminate research. And I cannot emphasize how important it is to disseminate research. Collection of data is one thing, and sitting on the data is not okay by me. Remember, you as a team have invested a lot of time and effort in creating the study. On the other hand, you have to be respectful of the subject or the participant who's given you, who's talked about their lived experiences with you and given you that 1 or 2 hours of their life, right? And you might just give them a very small incentive, but somewhere in their mind, it's also intrinsic motivation where they want to help, they want to uplift or elevate the lives of people around them through your research. So it's really important to just not sit on your research, but to disseminate the research. So we do it on 2 platforms. We do it in academic conferences. These are some of the big conferences: the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies, the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies. These are 2 important ones that we go to because we are in the trauma field. And to date, I'm blessed to have a fantastic team. We have over 120 oral and poster presentations and national and very reputable international conferences. So yeah, to be a part of my lab, you got to be interested in traveling to conferences. It's fun. It's, you know, it's like a little party once the conference is over. And then after 120 presentations, you also get tired. And this is me sleeping on a train to DC. And this is one of my brat friends who clicked my photograph while I was sleeping without makeup. This is not okay. But yes, this is how exhausted you are after a conference, that you just catch moments of sleep, because later on you got a party at night, right? So catch up on sleep in the train. We also do a lot of dissemination in terms of community engagement. So and I think some of you who are on this Zoom have been a part of this conference in 2019 or have at least attended this, where we do disseminate our own research. These are my students and some of the nonprofits and a very renowned professor here, Dr. Julian Ford, in the field of child abuse and post-traumatic stress. We invited him all the way from Connecticut. He obliged us. He came us. We were sponsored by the nonprofits. We got a good deal of money from them, and we could have this beautiful conference. And who, attended the conference here in the Valley? It was at UTRGV Edinburgh. We had over 250 participants from UTRGV. We had law enforcement. We had Children's Advocacy Center. We had the CASA workers. We have the nonprofits all coming together to hear the research that had been done in the community. So we just don't go to the academic platforms. We also like that we disseminate our research back to the community from whom we gathered the research, because I think it is our moral responsibility to do that. So my team and I, we do engage in that pre-COVID. Since COVID, we're trying to figure out stuff. Here we have some nonprofits who joined us for the conference. So here, this place. We also give out a lot of talks, such as this one. And we do it pro bono. Of course, we don't get paid for it. But I like to talk about, give out talks. I've been invited multiple times by the Children's Advocacy Center, by a lot of law enforcement agencies to talk about child abuse, neglect, and like forensic psychology related stuff. So I do go out in the Valley to talk about it. And besides the trauma, we also talk about, my team and I are very strong at statistics and advanced statistics. And here I was invited by the School of Medicine to talk about, an advanced statistics known as latent class analysis and related to lifetime interpersonal violence. And once we have disseminated knowledge, then we write up that article in teams. I like to promote, I'm at that stage of my career where I can promote a student and the student can take the lead. So I let them take the lead. Here you can say Ines is the first author. Here Oscar is the first author. Here I am the first author. So we do go out and then publish. Publication is, again, very important for us. And by publication, that we actually convert into scientific terms and we put it out there in the literature for a broader audience to read it. So that's how our researchers, and we also have fun. We have fun. We organized this ceramic workshop, I think it was 2018, with my friend and dear colleague in the School of Fine Arts. And many of these are like psychology club and psych students back then. And we went out to her facility and she had this potter's wheel and we made these like little plates here. Here's my ACT lab thing. And it was a day full of fun. It was so therapeutic, like it was like art therapy. And then, of course, we eat. I guess in Texas, when you're in Texas, you got to be a foodie. So here we just having fun and eating. We have games night. So yeah, future plans. If you do plan joining the lab at any point, we will continue focusing on traumatic events and traumatic stress reactions. But this is what's, at least in my mind, this is what I already have, and I'm planning for the future. We will be focusing on a new disorder, which is known as developmental trauma disorders, which is akin to complex PTSD in young children and adolescents. And I already have a large data set from Connecticut that we are looking at, and we are hoping to collect similar data sets here in the Valley. So it would be working with children who have, faced chronic, abuse, neglect, bereavement, impaired caregiving, so on and so forth. We are already collecting data on trauma and sexual, minority stressors from Latinx young adults. We are collecting data on sibling aggression in Latino youth in the underserved communities. We have already collected the pandemic-related stress and trauma, and I cannot emphasize, I had to put in pet attachment there because I love my pets. I'm an animal person. So yes, we are going to be looking at a number of things, but one of the things is also how pet attachment during COVID times has been such a therapeutic and like a protective factors for many of us, at least for me, in dealing with the uncertainties that the pandemic brought with it. And one of my students is working on gun violence. She's collected the data. She's working on it, and the data is from the RGV. And of course, whenever we talk about future plans, you have to include, we are open to new ideas. Till the time it's centered on trauma research, we are always, because there's so much that we don't know, and perhaps when you come into the lab, you would know, you would inform us about it. So yeah, we are open to any ideas. We are looking for young minds, young Turks like you. And by young minds, I don't mean the age. I mean, you have to be young in your mind. You can be 70 and young, or you can be 20 and old in your mind. We are looking, by young, I mean people who are young in their minds, are bubbling with energy, new ideas, enthusiasm. That's what is young for me. You can be 70 and you can do that. For a research assistant, anyone who's interested in trauma-related research, I do ask for a minimum 1 year, commitment, 8 to 10 hours of flexible work. If you're interested in pursuing higher education, you should be interested in, conferences and manuscript writing, in working with minoritized and marginalized communities, and even intersecting identities. I mean, I don't think any of us come with just one identity, that you're a man or you're a woman. You could be a man or a woman, or for certain race, ethnicity, or for certain sexual identity, So there are so many identities that we have, and they all intersect together to affect us, and they define us. So I would want anyone working in my lab to be inclusive of that, and also, be interested in working on that. And of course, giving back to the community in terms of advocacy work and just elevating the lives of, denizens and residents. I won't call citizens, but like denizens and residents of the Rio Grande Valley. In return, what can I offer you? Well, when you join the first year with me, you will be shadowing with a senior. We kind of acquaint you with the research softwares that we use. You can help with conference presentations, and you get peer supervision from a senior. Second, if you give me your second year, you take on projects You actively learn how to handle research software. So like I said, we are strong in stats and in the trauma field. So we use advanced stats. Don't feel scared of stats. We are very good at making it very simple. And then one-on supervision and conference presentation. And if you give me a third year, you will be disseminating the knowledge. You will engage in community, with the community, publication and grant writing. And if you make it to the fourth year with me, kudos to you for like giving me 4 years and bearing me for 4 years. But no, I have had many students who go on to work with me even after they graduate. Some of them work, they want to beef up their publication, go to really good schools. So we do that. And that's the end of my presentation. I better stop, otherwise I'll keep talking. This is my contact information. Some of you might have already emailed me and I would not have emailed back. Please be persistent. Email me so often that I don't forget your name. Copy paste the same email that you sent to me previously that I did not read if I would miss it. And if you want to know more in depth about some of my LGBTQ intersecting identities research on Women's Day, actually, March 8th at 3 p.m., we have, I and my collaborator at Oklahoma State, we will be talking about how we use mixed methods, working with LGBTQ population living in rural areas. And we will talk about how the pandemic has affected the stress levels and health of people. And this is a project that took place here in the Valley, in Oklahoma, and in Wyoming, so really rural spaces. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. And I wanted to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to talk. Before I hand it over to Ines, I also wanted to mention that I have a wonderful team of students, and they're actually my junior colleagues, and they have really helped me build the ACT Lab to where it is, to make it prolific in research, and I'm grateful to them. I'm very grateful to our fur babies that we have across the lab. They have been very, very helpful during the pandemic times and also before. Whenever we do our research and schoolwork, it can be pretty exciting and stressful. So these folks here really help us out. So adopt a little animal and take care of them, be kind to them, and be kind to the fellow human beings. Thank you. Is Ines here?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everybody. Well, first of all, I want to apologize because suddenly someone just decided to start fixing my roof, so it might be some noise there. So I apologize for that. I have a couple of slides to share. Let me see. Okay, here it is. So I'm gonna share just a couple of slides to make it more visual. Well, first of all, when I was thinking this morning about the slides, it was my journey. It's not, it did not start here. I'm from Spain. As you can see, I have an accent. So I studied there, and well, my journey in research started there when I was doing my master's. So I had to decide, okay, now I had to do a master thesis, what I want to do. So, and Dr. Charak was saying like networking is very important. So I was lucky enough to connect with a person that Dr. Villas Racionero, that she was working at the University of Nebraska. So she was interested in doing a project in Spain. So it was wonderful. So I can help you with that because I'm here in Spain. So we start collecting data. The study was about stalking, cyber stalking, and sexual coercion. So that was my first experience with research, and I love it. So then when I finished my master thesis, I was wondering from Spain what I want to do next. And it was like, this thing of doing research, I kind of like it. So I decided to look for a PhD. And this person, Dr. Villas Racionero, she connected me with Dr. Charak. And before applying to the PhD, we started working a bit together. She sent me some data that she had. So I start like working on this in the first thing that's say conference. So I start exploring how the experience during childhood are related to the face-to-face IPV and cyber IPV. So when I was exploring this, I did several conference presentations. In fact, one of them was in Granada, Spain, is where we met each other. And I also have been in Boston. And I completely agree with her, like a conference are fun and it's like the best excuse to travel and meet new places. So I started doing this poster oral presentation about this connection about the experience, the traumatic experience during childhood and how we're related with face-to-face IPV and cyber IPV, both perpetration and even victimization. That there was many theories, there are many theories out there. It might be because the social learning theory that they learn that these type of behaviors are acceptable to use in their own relationship. Also because the traumatic experience during childhood, some individuals might develop some mental health issues such as alcohol use, anger, emotional deregulation, that this might be affecting this intimate partner violence. So it was during this conference, I realized that there was not much information. There wasn't that much research out there about the use of technology on the intimate partner relationship. And as Dr. Charak mentioned earlier, now everybody uses technology. Uh, even people now is not meeting each other in person. They are meeting each other through dating apps. So technology is just increasing and is increasing. So um, it's when I start thinking that, yeah, I think that they go more in studying how the use of technology, how people use technology to perpetrate violence. I decided that it was going to be my goal. So, well, once I did these conference presentations, I find interesting results, and I decided to start writing this article named Witnessing Parental Violence and Cyber IPV. So in this article, we study how those individuals that witness parental violence during childhood might perpetrate violence in the cyber violence in their own relationship. And it was a mediator that it was the attitudes toward violence that these people develop, in the sense that if I witness violence in my childhood, I learn that these type of behaviors are okay. So when I'm in a relationship, I'm gonna use this behavior, violent behavior, because to me is what I learned how to deal with the relationship. So, and also now I'm working on my thesis, and I decide to keep working on cyber IPV. And here is where statistical analysis are amazing and it's very important to know how to do certain analysis. So I'm doing my thesis about the patterns of cyber IPV, the predictors and mental health outcomes. So by patterns, I'm to look at it and using an analysis that I've been very lucky that Dr. Charak is very good at that, and she was able to mentoring me during the process I was learning later in class analysis. So with, I mean, at the end, yeah, if you want to do research, you had to be at least motivated to learn statistical analysis. So I'm exploring how there are different groups of cyber IPV, of individuals that have cyber IPV perpetration and victimization. So, well, let me see. Well, yeah, so with these two last studies, I realized of two things. First of all, because I didn't mention, but these studies are in 100% of Hispanic population. So I started wondering, which is the impact of culture on these results, right? Because we were finding about all with the last one, the patterns of cyber IPV, that violence is bidirectional, which means that I'm saying that I'm committing violence, but I am also saying that that my partner is being violent against me through technology. So I was wondering if some cultural factors, for example, feminism might play a role on those, on that bidirectionality, right? Because feminism is this great identification with the members of family, this motivation to have a family and keep together with your partner. So this is one of the steps I want to explore in the future, to understand which is the role of culture on those on this intimate partner violence, specifically through technology. Because it's very important to understand this if we want to develop like intervention strategies that people want to follow, because if we are not taking into account the cultural factors, many individuals are not gonna feel understood in therapy or in the intervention, so they are not gonna follow these guidelines or help. And so once I had these two questions, like which is the impact of cultural factor and why cyber IPV is bidirectional, is when I start to design my study. I'm still working on it. And if any of you is interested in joining the lab, and if any of you are also interested in this topic, I will be more than happy to assist you in the study and teach you and mentoring you in a bit on how the study and research work. In this case, I decide that I want to do a mixed methods study. So far, all the things that I present to you, it was qualitative data. So it means that it's a person that is answering a questionnaire online, right? But I realized that if I want to answer my questions, I need another type of study. So it's when I decide to, maybe I need to add some quantitative data. That is mostly interviews, and you ask to a person, an individual, about specific questions, so you have a more comprehensive information. So so mixed methods study is a combination of these two factors, right? But I'm not here to teach you methodology or statistics analysis. So I just want to emphasize that I'm developing this study to understand first the specific risk factors of cyber IPV. There are specific risk factors, for example, how people use technology or what type of technology are they using. Also, I want to know the impact of cultural factors, because if we don't understand the impact of cultural factors, as I mentioned before, we are not be able to develop appropriate intervention and preventive strategies. And then in the quantitative part, I want to understand how is this bidirectional violence? Because there are many studies that are indicating that sometimes if we stay in a relationship for many reasons, we can decide to stay in a relationship that might be abusive, we might end up using violence because it's what we learn in the relationship, because it's the only way to deal with the relationship. So I want to understand exactly how that bidirectional violence happen, and also a bit more how the use of technology is. Because even I'm young, but I'm not very good at technology, so I feel like I need that insight of how people is using technology these days, right? So I think it will be a wonderful study, and as I mentioned, if any of you is interested, I will be more than happy to assist you in the study. And that's all for my part. I think now, I don't know if Dr. Charak wants to add something else, but
Thanks, Ines. I mean, yes, just to emphasize on her mixed method, she's trying to do interviews along with like asking those yes, no kind of questions so that she can integrate those results. And through qualitative interviews, actually get into the nuances of experiences. So like when you get into the cultural, machismo, marianismo, feminismo, you really need to talk to the person. That the scales out there aren't so good. So that's why she's, and I think she's doing a brilliant job. Thank you, Ines. Thank you for being a part of my team. I
You're
really
welcome.
value you. Yeah. Stephanie, over to you.
Well, thank you. I just want to say thank you to both of you for that amazing presentation. It was pretty informative. I don't know if anyone else has any questions for Dr. Charak and Ines. I know I do. uh, so
Yeah.
first of all, do you always know what your research interests were for both of you?
Ines, do you want to go?
Um, in a more generic way, yes, I did. I knew I was more into trauma and violence, but then once you are studying, I mean, sometimes I didn't know that I was gonna be so excited about studying the violence that occurs through technology. So sometimes you go exploring while you are doing some conference presentations, you are like doing some analysis, reading some articles.
Yeah, even for me, it's been an evolving process. Yes, trauma was the first thing when I was perhaps maybe, in your shoes, Stephanie, I was just so confused. You are more sought. I just spoke to you before this present. You're more sought out. I was actually out. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. Everything was so excited. I did some projects on yoga and well-being, and then some trauma, and then something on friendship. I was doing so many things. And then I realized that the trauma was really hitting a chord. And I knew it. This is something that I can do for the rest of my life, like research on this topic. And like Ines mentioned, once you know that thing, what hits the chord in you, then it is an evolving, iterative process. You go to conferences, you talk to collaborators, you talk to young minds such as you, and you just develop that idea and it keeps developing. So that's my take.
It's amazing. That's good to know. I know it might seem that like I do have everything figured out regarding like my research experience, but it's really not. I'm shaping myself still.
Yeah. Believe me, all of us are. We are work in progress till the time we leave Mother Earth. I don't know after that, but yeah, we are work in progress.
That's good. I have another question. How do you manage your data?
How do we manage our data nowadays or pre-COVID?
Nowadays.
Nowadays, everything is online. So some of our studies, especially the one that was really close to me, Colonia, that has come to a standstill. So we are still thinking, I am still thinking about, all right, how do I make it into online study? Also remember, in research, what happens is when major episodes like a whole year or pandemic takes place, it starts affecting the data. It's confounding the data. I was looking at trauma and then another trauma happened. Now, am I looking at the original trauma or the effect of this pandemic, which is traumatic in itself, right? So it confounds the data. So we are still thinking. But in the meanwhile, we have launched studies. Like I said, in Spain, we are launching, Ines will launch. I've already launched one on pandemic and trauma and stress in LGBTQ individuals across rural spaces. So we already have that data that's coming to us, and we are looking at that. I have, because of my networks, I have access to a lot of clinical data sets, which are, it's tough to collect clinical data sets at the university level. You have to be in like a hospital setup. So yeah, but I have been lucky to have people offer me those data sets. So what we do initially, because Ines also works on those data sets, we kind of carve our initial being or presence in that field, and then we kind of use that thing across our setup here to see. So we always do the pilot work and then kind of translate it into like our regions here. But some of our work is original, like cyber, IPV, and everything. I think so. We are like 3 labs across, if not United States, the world, who is engaging in technology-mediated intimate partner violence.
Thank you for that. I don't know if anyone else has any questions.
Yeah, feel
or-
free. I haven't really elaborated a lot on my research area. So if you want to know more in depth into like what in PTSD do you do, or what in technology, or what in among the LGBTQ population do you study, just ask me.
I want to know, is it difficult working with people pretty much all over the world?
No, it's really exciting. It's like you listen to different accents and different perspectives. They ask about what's happening in United States. You had the winter storm. Like what's happening? And then you tell her, oh my God, I was out of like power outage. And they say, oh my, we also had the storm. It's bad here. So like imagine I'm comparing like Texas with like United Kingdom or like Denmark. And then they hear the temperatures here. They're like, really? Stop being a baby, Ruby. It's not winter. It's not hot enough because it's super cold there. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun once you kind of know them. And I do want to mention, behind all these networks also are nice friendships. They might not be your friends per se. They're not my age. Many of them are older than me. Many of them are younger than me. But as soon as it becomes fun and exciting, that's a network that you want to have, because it's working with a very, very hard network. You don't want that, like, because that's anyways, research can be stressful. You don't want another layer of stress over it. You want something that you get up and say, all right, I'll Zoom for that person, even if it's like 7 o'clock in the morning with my UK collaborators and the ones in mainland Europe. I have to get up, especially the ones who have families. I have to get up at 7:30, and I'm like, you know what? I'm in my pajamas. Please pardon me. They're like, you fine. So it's. I think it's fun. I take it as fun because it's also like, oh yeah, we're academic family and academic friends. Ines?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Charak. Now, for example, I'm collaborating with a person in Spain that happens that he was my friend earlier, and we realized that, okay, we are interested in similar things. Why we don't start something in Spain? So it's very exciting also meeting new people, and yeah, you have the opportunity to, at the end, to be exposed to different cultures and knowledge and ideas. And
It's a whole new cultural experience, I think. Sometimes we do focus, like if you're in the Rio Grande Valley, we're thinking about the culture here. But yes, it is a culture really important to focus on. But if you look at the larger gamut of things, we are a global society, and learning about different societies is beautiful. That's my opinion on it. I want more networks.
Okay. So like my main concern was like meetings because of the different times. It will be so difficult to meet with, like you said, someone from the UK. Are they like 7 hours ahead of us? And
Yeah.
I can imagine India, it must be at least 16 hours, 16 hours.
Yeah, we are on opposite sides. So it's like when it's morning here, it's night there. So one of us is, if I'm collaborating with people in India, and which I am, one of us is killing some part of our sleep. But again, like it's because it's exciting, you do it. You're like, oh yeah, okay. You're not doing it every day. Maybe once in a month, or maybe once in 2-3 months. Rest is all through emails that you're collaborating and stuff. So, or you're using Dropbox or some cloud to, work on projects. So it's. I think that's why I say you don't want to work with networks that stress you, because you don't want to get up in the morning or sacrifice your sleep for them. But you want to work with networks that make you smile, and give you that extra bump. So yeah.
That's good to know. Anyone else have any question? I think actually Andrea has a question.
Yes. So
Yes.
I do have one question. So you study trauma and a lot of things relating to trauma. Have you ever looked at trauma or PTSD and heart disease? Especially in people who have endured childhood trauma, because I'm really interested in like the developmental risk factors there are behind things like heart disease and diabetes And there's actually quite a bit of research that suggests that if you do have prolonged stress, especially if you've lived in a stressful home environment, or even like a stressful community or a stressful, neighborhood, there are higher rates of diabetes and heart disease in those areas. And I've always wondered, and there's, not just me, but other researchers have wondered, whether or not trauma has something to do with that. So, I was just asking, like, if you've ever considered doing research like that.
Yes, that's an excellent question. I'm so glad, Andrea, that you brought it up. How to, we work in such siloed, environments where psychology is in itself and engineering is in itself and cardiology is in itself, and we don't really cross borders. We make these walls around us. And I think you're absolutely right. I don't know if you have read research or this is just your instinct, but it is right.
Yeah.
Because of chronic stress, which is like child abuse, people are, by you, I mean the index person, is at very heightened risk of physical disorders like diabetes, like coronary heart diseases, like cardiovascular diseases. And as a matter of fact, my partner is a cardiologist, and I have been after him all this while. He's also a researcher as well. I've been after him, and I'm like, you know what? You keep doing these funny, like these echocardiograms and blah, blah, blah. And you need to add the psychology and the trauma into your research, because this is big. And, cardiac psychology is a thing. It's a
Yes.
very limited field, a very small field, and very few people do it. But it is a field where people are looking at how chronic stress and trauma starts to affect even like your, what's that called? Like your ejection factors of the heart and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I'm just trying to get him on board, because many of these medical people, they're like, oh, okay, they're again very siloed, and they're like, what, psychology? They have the little bias against us.
I
So
know, right? I had been dating somebody for like such a long time, and he was like a pre-med student. And the first lab that I was in, I was actually in Dr. Lynn's eating choice or food study lab, and he was like, what's the point of that? How does that help people? And that's actually how I got really into like health psychology, is because I was challenged so much by that area of research to ask about like what are the health what are the which
yeah,
I don't think that the only reason why we should be studying trauma, because it's important, like regardless, like we know it has a physiological impact on us, and even if it didn't, right, that doesn't change the fact that when somebody's enduring trauma or enduring the effects of trauma, they're still going through a lot. So it's still important research. That's why I'm really glad you have a whole lab dedicated to trauma and
yeah.
studying the effects of trauma and the risk factors to trauma. That is such important research. So, and I'm really glad you came and spoke with us.
Thank you. And Andrea, when minds like you talk about these things on even these platforms and bigger platforms, that pushes the national federal government to think about it. And they're thinking about it. How? Because the National Institute for Health now does not want purely like psychology work or purely like cardiovascular diseases. They are looking for like interdisciplinary work. So they're asking, hey, you might be doing your fancy or imaging of the heart, but what about factors like trauma? 90% of the US population, 90, has had a traumatic event, even if it's like a motor vehicle accident. We have had it, all of us. Only if we are 100 of us here, only 10 did not have anything. 90 of us have had it. I have faced traumatic events in my life, right? So but most of us are resilient. So the NIH, which is National Institute for Health in the United States, is asking, hey, what about the psychology behind it? So your ideology is right, and your opinions are absolutely right.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very glad. And something else that you might want to talk to your partner about is integrated healthcare and also like behavioral medicine. That's like a whole up and coming field, and it looks at, you know, the psychological human factors behind things like treatment adherence and patient compliance and all of these other things, because there are even like psychological barriers that have to do with trauma and their ability to comply with certain treatment
Yeah.
plans or certain health advice. And I thought that was really interesting. So it's something that every medical professional should definitely look into.
I know. So there's something known as, and I know there's a question by Marianne, and Marianne, just in a second, we'll let you speak. Andrea, there is something known as like trauma-informed care, okay, TIC, and that doesn't just happen. That model is so phenomenal. We don't have it yet, but practiced here yet. But what it does is looking at trauma so ingrained as not like traumatic experiences, but like looking at people have trauma experiences. So how can a whole organization, how can a whole organization be more trauma informed and give trauma informed care from all the way to like something, when you open the door to a clinic and you step in, what are the flyers that are there? Are they inclusive of people? Are they inclusive of your immigration status, your sexual identity, your gender identities? So how inclusive, how does the person speak to you? Is there like a warm shake hand they do, or they're like dismissive of you? So all these things, yes, there is hope. We are moving towards that, and within your lifespan, you will see it. It'll happen.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really excited for that. Like that's like the area of psychology that excites me the most. So
good. Yeah. Thank you so much for your questions.
Yeah,
Marianne.
Yes, I am interested to know the political side of your research, as into, I know that there's a lot of difference that research can make, but if you don't address where the change could be made, like I know that there's a lot of things that are suggested by the psychological, like you, that are trying to partner up with your friend and in adding the psychological part in his research, or I didn't get if it was research or something he's already made. But I know that a lot of it has to do with the politics part of it because of pharmaceuticals or the pharmacology. And I think that partnering up with like the right politicians that could make a change in implementing this, because I see that there's a lot of people that get exhausted in a lot of the work that they do because they just don't see change, or change is delayed, or there's just not a lot of support or monetary. And I just wanted to know like how progressed is that part of when it comes to the political part of it in trying to make the change.
Thank you, Marianne. That's a wonderful question. And that brings me back to dissemination of work. Number one, I wanted to say, I did mention my partner, but I'm not really working with him. But doing, like Ines and I and the rest of the team, when we do go to conferences, not to call it political, but let me call it policies that we want to focus on.
You're right.
So like policies, because political, I mean, everyone has their own agenda. So we want to work on policies that can help with improving lives. So, and that's the reason why we also focus a lot on working in alliance with the nonprofits here, right? Or going out to the community and as scientists telling them in simple language, this is what we do. Now, if Ines goes out there and says, hey, my latent class analysis showed this, you don't expect people to know what a latent class is. And she says, this is the pattern of victimization I see. These are the percentages. Number of people who have traumatic experience is 90%. So that makes sense, right? So this is what we do. So we go to the nonprofits, like before COVID, like every Friday of like once a month, we have a meeting. Now it's online. Before that, even Ines has been, we go to a consortium of 9 nonprofits working in the Rio Grande Valley, the health committee, I'm one of the co-chairs of the trauma committee. So we work there, we talk about our research. We are not doing, I'm not a caseworker, so I'm not working directly with the participant because I need to do my work at UTRGV as well. But we always make it a point to go there and spend 2 hours of ours every month to talk about, hey, you know what, we were looking at this. Can you think about it? So, and whenever the nonprofits have some funding, they reach out to us. Throughout the pandemic, they have reached out to me. I just had a meeting this Monday with the Valley AIDS Council, focusing on MSM and the use of polysubstance use in the Valley, men having sex with men. And they reach up and say, hey, what's your research showing and what's the ground reality? And we tell them, this is what research is showing. How do we bring the resources to the grassroots? So that's the policy work we do. At times, the nonprofit reaches out to us, as they did in the pandemic, and they say, hey, Ruby, we know this is a very traumatic experience for people living through a pandemic. Like after a century, we are living through this. What all should we be looking at? As a scientist, what do you think we should be looking at? So we advise them, this is what you should look at, and we collect data, and then we give them back. Like I've been to, so there's something known as like a white paper. So when you I've worked with like oh God, what do you call it? The district attorney's office here through the nonprofit, where we did some work on trauma and stuff, and they presented like a white paper to all the policymakers across the Rio Grande Valley. They invited them, and we just disseminated the knowledge. So we do that. I know I'm not 100% doing it, but I cannot. I have my responsibilities at UTRGV, but I try my level best, my dear, because this is what it is to be a part of a society of, you just don't, and that's what I tell my students, don't get siloed in your labs. Our labs are beautiful. They're nice. It's nice, cushiony, we have nice, cushiony couches and stuff, and air conditioning and everything, but we got to step out of it as well. And we do.
Yeah. The reason I asked as well is because I know that like you mentioned, that they ask, they call you, they seek out to you, and these are just the nonprofits. But I know that there is like where research is beneficial to them, but for whatever that it is that they're doing. But then it's kind of like, does it go hand in hand? Like my research helps you, and then you make it what is it, like a solid thing? Right. Like,
yeah.
Is it interchangeable, or is it like a one way? Because I know that a lot of medical don't, or even law, they don't consider research a concrete to use to change law, because the law is just reworded, but which is psychology and statistics, yes, but psychology, it's kind of like a doom in the court system. In a lot of cases, but because I'm not like very familiar with what impact the research that is not what is it called, like the studies that you do that don't make it to the books. That's what I mean, like your progress, the research. And the reason I mentioned that is because I know that there's been a lot of my friends that have worked in research, and then it's like, but that went nowhere, and I just wasted a year, and they did nothing with that research and things like that. And it's like,
yeah. So at times I wouldn't disagree that there are projects that die down, right? Or there are projects that are put on hold. Or there are projects, if they are contaminated for whatever reasons, they need to be stopped. Remember?
Right.
So they need to be stopped. You do not want contaminated data to go out, because believe me, like as much as we think that policies are not made, or my little research is just another publication, who's going to read it? People do read it. Like, I'm surprised people will email and say, we read your research and we saw this. I'm like, oh, okay, people are reading. So so we have to be cognizant of that and responsible enough. I don't know if you're trying to ask me if there's like a symbiotic relationship between the nonprofits and us. We
I
base,
think there is.
yes. So it's not that we are
Yes.
promoting whatever results they want. We are trained to be scientists, and I will never
Right.
risk it to say anything that my data does not reveal. I can say that for Ines as well. Ines most recently got some of the biggest researchers. There was a slight error, and then they had to put in a corrigendum to change that error because it was already published, right? So yes, we do when we do make, to err as human, if we do make some mistakes, we do put in a correction and stuff. All our data is to do with numbers, and now we will start the interviews, and whatever the data tells us, that's we will never ever concoct stuff to support anything. No.
Right.
Yeah. So if
No,
that's what you're asking.
No, it
No.
was more like when you help them, let's say they needed a grant and they needed your research to support that, so that their grant can be, then like if you were to reach out to them, would it be reciprocated basically?
Yes,
Like,
it
do they
is.
help
So,
you out,
yeah.
or it's like, no, forget it, there's nothing you could offer us, your research, or that's
They
my
do.
question. Like,
They do,
that's good.
because they do see I mean,
Partnership, continuous support.
it is, you knock 10 doors and 2 open. The
Yeah.
other 8 are closed. So be it. You go to the next door, right? 8 will close. Even when I'm collecting data in the colonias, people don't open their doors for me. I can see them through the window. So they will not. And I have an appointment with them, but it's okay for whatever reason. It's fine. Everybody has the freedom to do that. So even with the nonprofits, you need to find someone who matches your ideology, your vision. I mean, there are so many nonprofits working on different areas. I don't collaborate with everyone. I collaborate with some with whom me and my team, we share a vision, because you're right, there, the symbiotic partnership, positive relationships come in. And of course, if they would close their doors on me or on my students or my team, we would not. But thankfully, that has not. They've always been supportive, even when we were going out in the colonias. That's a very tough population to gather. They sponsored case workers for us because they wanted to know. They do not know the research, and they're like, please tell us what's the problem, grassroots level, so that I can go to the district attorney and say, so-and-so published it, and this is what is science. So Ines and my expertise is in the science, the empirical evidence. We are trained to do that. The nonprofits would go and take those voices, those scientific voices, to the policymakers in the valley. I might be shy. I don't know how to talk.
That's what I wanted. That
Okay.
was there. You just answered my whole question. Yeah.
Sorry, it took me a while.
So there is an active, that was, because I had not had an answer. It was always like other cities or other places, or it's like, but here in the RGV, I wanted to know. And I asked because I work with youth, and I've been involved, and I hear all that, like Judge Villalon. I see how much he wants it, but he's just one department, and it's like it would just be ideal if I think he's partnering up with the UTRGV, and so it's kind of like I see how it's starting, and you think like, wait, it's barely making a difference. It's barely, but it isn't. It's just there, but you just have to know where to go, how to ask, where to look for the info, and if you don't, then you don't know of it, basically.
But then if you, Marianne, you know the resource, so-and-so judge has this endeavor, but that person does not know Ines or Ruby, you connect, you bridge, right? As a responsible.
That's why I'm asking.
You bridge those people, because I might not know them. Ines might not know them. I would have never met them, but you bridge, and that's through the
I am
nonprofit.
Interested. That's okay, yeah. I'm very interested in not just my focus. I like the whole branch. You know, it's like the tree that we are, we branch out every single which way, and we just need to interconnect with that trunk, which is everyone.
And
And
the roots,
I
yeah.
was asking because, right, the roots are there. We just, some of us reach it, some of us don't. And there is going to be a meeting coming up, and I wanted, there's still a lot of people missing, or a lot of like entities that need to come in. And that was one of the reasons I was asking, because
Cool, connect us if
I actually
in
have
any ways. Mhm.
I have a meeting on Saturday, so that's why I was asking, because I wanted to bring it up.
Okay, well, if you want to connect our work with, if it's their vision, then we would be happy to collaborate.
Yes, I will. I'll email you. I will email
Thank
you.
you,
and
Marianne. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for the info.
Okay. That was pretty interesting to hear, honestly. Anyone else have any questions before we close the session up? Well, I don't take that as a no, but thank you so much for being here today for that amazing presentation. Again, I loved it. I learned so much. And let me just quickly send out for the mailing list. Anyone that's interested in hearing from future events hosted by SAR can join that mailing list. And yeah, thank you so much again. Y'all have a nice day. Take care during these difficult times. And if you have any questions regarding SAR or for Dr. Charak about her research lab, feel free to reach out again.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and the people who are here. Thank you for showing up. This is the first step towards having a very research enlightened mind. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Ines. You're wonderful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.